Hi there, I hope you're well. If you're finding it difficult to move on from beginner drum grooves like this, to more advanced beats like this, then let's take a look at how to unlock these tricky offbeat notes and take your independence to the next level. So let's start off at the very beginning with the most basic rock groove. Quarter notes on the hi-hat, beats 1 and 3 on the kick, and 2 and 4 on the snare drum. Now you've probably already played this groove a million times and moved on to other things. But now start to think about how you actually move when you play this. It's not just the downward motion towards the drums that creates this groove, but also, and more importantly, the upward motion that we use between each note to keep things moving. So as we play this quarter note based 4/4 beat, try counting the eighth notes between each beat as you lift each limb towards the next note. So what happens if we add more notes to this groove? Let's put some eighth notes onto the hi-hat now, keeping the quarter notes on the kick and snare. As we add these extra hi-hat notes, we still want the motion of our right foot and left hand playing the kick drum and the snare to be exactly the same as it was before. When you're working on independence, you have to ask, is the new set of motions that I've added to this affecting the other moving parts? So as we play this groove, you can still reference the eighth notes to lift your right foot and your left hand, only this time your right hand is moving back down to play the hi-hat as this happens. Now let's add some eighth note kicks into this groove on the and of 1 and the and of 3. Now obviously we want these notes to lock in with the eighth notes that we're playing on the hi-hat. So again, make sure the upward motion of your right foot is locked in with the upward motion of your right hand leading into these notes. But also, as you concentrate on this, don't neglect the motion and the movement in your left hand to play the 2 and 4. It can be really easy to lose your awareness of this as you start to concentrate on other stuff, but keep those trigger points the same for when you lift your left hand into the backbeat, exactly as it was before. If we switch the extra eighth notes onto the snare instead, exactly the same thing applies. Lock in the upward motion of your left hand to match your right hand playing the hi-hat to make sure these notes are played in unison. And make sure as you play the quarter note on the kick that you're still moving it upward again as you were before relative to the eighth note before it. Now let's add an extra layer of independence to all of this. And this is usually where most of us hit our first real struggle. If we play 2 eighth notes on the kick in beats 1 and 3, so 1 and 3 and, as we did previously, but this time against a quarter note hi-hat pattern, we now need to place those extra kicks in between the hi-hat notes without disrupting the flow of our right hand. Playing 2 notes versus 1 on our right side can be a real challenge for any drummer in the beginning. Our right hand and right foot are kind of wired up in our brains to follow each other. This is why, as drummers, we spend the rest of our lives trying to get these two to work independently. So when you first encounter this, you might find that you can't help but play this. This is obviously happening because your right hand wants to follow your right foot on both of these notes. Eventually, you might get this to a point where you are only playing the hi-hat once as you play 2 kicks, but you're still doing an air shot in between those notes where your right hand still wants to follow even though it's not hitting the hi-hat. This makes everything sound correct, but it still doesn't feel right and your right hand isn't moving independently. So really, to unlock this, and this point is going to become just as, if not more important, as you move on to more complex grooves, you need to make sure that your right hand is still moving away from the hi-hat in an upward motion as you play the second eighth note on the kick drum. This makes each of these two kicks feel different relative to your right hand motion. The first note locks in and your right foot follows the right hand up and down again to play the one, and then to play the and, they both move in the opposite direction. Again, the same thing applies if we want to play 2 eighth notes on the snare. Keep your right hand moving upwards as you play the second eighth note. So now if we move on to playing 16th notes on the kick between eighth note hi-hats, the same rules and the same principles apply as between the quarters and the eighths. The relationship between these notes is the same as the quarters and eighths. We're playing 1 versus 2 or 2 versus 4. So to play a kick on the E or the A, your right foot is going to be moving in the opposite direction to your right hand. As you play through this example, also remember to be aware of your left hand and keep that moving independently. It should be at the top of its stroke as you play the 16th kick placement. Once again, the same thing applies if we play 16th notes on the snare between the eighth note hi-hats. As you play this groove, your hands move in unison to play the snare on the backbeat, but to displace the snare onto the A, onto one of the 16th note placements, you need to move your hands in the opposite direction to land the snare between the hi-hats as your right hand is moving up. Now as we add more notes to these grooves, you can see how these motions occur in various places through the bar, but it's all the same idea. And here with more snares added to the groove, the same idea of moving in unison to play the backbeat and the hands playing in the opposite directions to play in the spaces. Any time that you're stuck with an independence problem, if you can shift your awareness to your upward movements and think about how they interact with all of the other moving parts that you might be juggling, you're going to have way more success and get things feeling and sounding good in a more beneficial and efficient way. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. If you did, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.